So good morning, Jolie.
Good
Thanks so much for joining
morning.
us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll talk about the definition of jealousy in a second, but is jealousy inherently bad, inherently good, inherently neutral? How would you sort of describe it?
Well, I actually struggle with this because if you go type in and look for the APA, the American Psychological Association's definitions, they have their online dictionary right there. And jealousy is listed as a negative emotion. Like right there at the start of the definition, they say a negative emotion. But they don't say that for anger or sadness, right? We just talk about them being an emotion that's informational. It's telling us something. It's a detection system, right? But there is a bias against jealousy that says, let's put jealousy completely into the bad box. Except when we actually dig into it, jealousy is there to protect us. And we can find evidence that there is jealousy as early as 6 months old. Sybil Hart's research on this is beautiful. It's talking about how jealousy can show up in infancy, and therefore we could see it as protective. It's trying to keep us connected to our valued others. When we're infants, that's life or death. And then when we're adults, it can feel like life or death. So of course, it's easy to put jealousy into that category of, can I just never have to feel it? It's just bad. It's yucky. But if we get closer to it, it can actually be incredibly helpful and can even build intimacy with ourselves and between us and our partners.
That's really interesting, and how young in age we can experience this.
It really is.
I have, as I mentioned, three daughters, and I do remember when my oldest was 6 months old. So this is some 20 years ago now. And I had she was displaying traits of jealousy toward my wife to me, meaning she wanted to cuddle up with me, and if she saw my wife cuddling up with me, she would kind of come in there and kind of push her away and things like that. And I remember talking to someone at the time, is that just normal behavior? And they said, no, it's a little bit of jealousy, which I thought was interesting. Is that, I mean, jealousy from a romantic relationship, I think, is how people often think about it, but is there a correlation with envy, with sibling rivalries, with things like that?
Right. Well, I would say that sibling rivalry is a combination, and that's what the research tells us. It's a combination of behaviors. There's competitiveness, there's jealousy, there's envy, and these are all distinct behaviors. Like we can sort out jealousy from envy, for instance. They're both important, but they are distinct, and they all show up right away, right? Like they show up so early, and most of us never get talked to about them, but we can sort out. Maybe it would be great to sort out jealousy from envy, because those are the two people often confuse and conflate. Jealousy.
And let's do that. Yeah. So to tell, I mean, is it worthwhile sort of looking at definitions of these words, or how do you sort of reduce the conflation between the two?
Yeah, I think the best way to reduce that conflation is to say, there's a shape to jealousy. Jealousy is a triangle. There is myself, if I'm the jealous one, the beloved or the valued other, and then the interrupter or the perceived interrupter. So I have self, beloved, interrupter. In a childlike relationship, right? In a childhood relationship, we're talking about the self, the child, and the parent, the caregiver. That's their valued other, and then their rival. And that rival, we still see the triangle, right? So there's the jealousy triangle. That's how we know it's jealousy. And that's distinct from envy. Envy is about a dyad. It's me and the other. I want what they have, or I want to be what they are. So envy can be motivating in a way. If I see someone who has something I want, who is a way that I want to be, I can transform my life, right? I can move toward that thing. I could find it motivating. Whereas jealousy, generally speaking, is about a threat response. I'm afraid that this other is going to interrupt my valued relationship. And it can put us into a very helpless feeling state, like I don't know what to do. But if we think about it, since we can spot jealousy as early as 6 months old, well, if we are cast back into this infancy, this infantile reaction, and then we find ourselves in a grown-up relationship, we got some problems, because all of the behaviors, crying and wailing, generally not going to help. But in fact, jealousy does still inspire that kind of behavior. And that doesn't actually help us bring our partner closer. It does help us move the emotion through our bodies and can be very helpful. But I like to sort jealousy and envy because we need to treat them differently. And we need to do that with our children as well.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. Is jealousy necessary to some extent? Like if you just look at it from an evolutionary standpoint, if it's something that we develop so early in life,
Yeah.
do you make the argument that there's an evolutionary benefit to it?
Evolutionary psychologists have a couple of different theories about why jealousy is an evolved emotion, and where its starting point is, like where that evolution point comes in. So Sybil Hart did some great research with Heather Carrington on this is about protecting the mother-child bond. David Buss has done other research that saying that this is about mate guarding. This is about I need to protect where my genetic material is going. So that would be more an adult romantic jealousy. Both of those, though, regardless of which one rings true for you, both of them point to the idea that, yeah, jealousy, far from being the unevolved emotion that people often think it is, it's actually exactly an evolved emotion. It's there because it served a purpose at some point. And yet now it often causes a lot more problems than people would like it to. So in your modern day experience, just because it was evolved to protect you doesn't mean that your experience of jealousy is actually protecting you. So we got to dig into that. Sometimes jealousy is helpful. Sometimes it's extraordinarily damaging.
I think that's the thing, right? I even in preparing for this conversation, I was thinking, okay, and I talked to my wife about this, and I even talked to my girls. Jealousy, just your initial reaction to that, and it has a bad rap.
Yeah, it does.
It has a bad rap, and I think part of it, I think what you're saying is that it can go from maybe being helpful to some extent to being highly destructive.
Right.
And how do you know when you have crossed that threshold?
Well, most of the time I find people don't recognize it from the inside early enough, which is part of the problem, right? We don't know how to recognize jealousy in us. And it crosses that threshold through behaviors, right? The threshold isn't about how intense the jealousy feels inside. It's what do I do with the jealousy when it shows up? And I mean, let's be real. Intimate partner violence, domestic violence often has cited as some of the impetus, some of the background material is often, oh, there was jealousy present. So this can result in very serious outcomes. We have to think about the fact that jealousy, if I'm struggling with the jealousy I have inside and it starts to cross the threshold in which I can contain it, now I've got a problem because now I may get violent, or I may actually get destructive to my own relationship or to my friendships. I may go on the attack. And if I do, as I'm destroying the relationship with my behavior, my justification inside may be jealousy, but that doesn't actually mean that I get the result that I wanted, right? Think of any love triangle. Frequently, when we see a love triangle portrayed, we don't see people winding up real happy about how that all played out. So it makes sense that we struggle to figure out how to manage our jealousy and then what to do with our behavior around it. Also because we never talk about it. So I don't know how old are your girls?
Almost 20, 18, and almost 16.
Okay. Yeah. My kids are in the same age range. And it's so funny to me. I study jealousy. They know I study jealousy. And still, when I talk with them about jealousy, yeah, they still want to run in the other direction. There is this like, oh, do I have to deal with that? But I've asked thousands of people, hey, what did your parents teach you about jealousy or envy? So far, I have never received an affirmative, yeah, my parents really sat with me, really walked through what jealousy is, really helped me understand how to work with it and how not to overreact and get into a position where I'm being aggressive, possessive, or violent. Yeah, they totally did that. Instead, I hear, I don't know, I wasn't really told anything about it, which means we have this infant behavior. And then we all know how toddlers look with sibling rivalry. It is not pretty, right? We have this very childish behavior. We fast forward to our years in puberty where we're experiencing a huge onrush of new experiences and the complications of romance. Again, nobody's likely to sit and talk with us about exactly the nuances of this jealousy and what's going on and what we might need to do about it. And then we find ourselves adults and we just think, I should be able to deal with this.
Does it decrease or diminish over your lifespan? I mean, I'm closer in age to 60. My kids are closer in age to 20. Does that change over time?
No, in fact, I've only seen that people who experience a lot of jealousy, the only thing that seems to diminish it is if they start interacting with their jealousy, normalizing the fact that they feel jealous and deal with it. Because some of us are really sensitive to jealousy inducing behaviors, and some of us are less so. Some of us have a high threshold for it. It's the one thing I could say is, if you're in a long-term relationship that feels secure over time, monogamy does sort of make this promise that, well, if everything's secure and everything's going well, you won't have to deal with jealousy.
Right.
Now, we know that, in fact, I mean, the divorce numbers alone tell us monogamy is kind of writing checks it can't cash there, because monogamy itself doesn't protect us from being cheated on, right? I wish it did, but it doesn't. And so I don't see any differences in no reduction of jealousy. And in fact, when I studied monogamous people versus non-monogamous people, their responses to jealousy were different because non-monogamous people expected to have to deal with jealousy. So they were pre-gaming, they were preparing themselves, they were getting ready, they were thinking about jealousy, and their community talks about jealousy. It's much more normalized to say, well, yeah, jealousy is going to come up and you're going to have to deal with it in productive ways. So we could actually take that and apply it in monogamous relationships and say, yeah, what if we increase our conversation, normalize the fact that it comes up, and remember that just because I'm jealous doesn't necessarily mean my partner's doing anything wrong, but they also might be. This is why it's tricky, right?
Is that suspicious then? I mean, so we've talked about the overlap between jealousy and envy.
Yeah.
There's a component of shame, I think, that goes with jealousy.
Yeah.
What about?
Well, let's talk about, so if jealousy is a threat response, it would be great to think like jealousy just comes by itself, but unfortunately, jealousy comes along with a whole bunch of other emotions. So when jealousy comes up, and there are differing theories on whether jealousy is a basic emotion or a complex emotion, but whichever of those theories you follow, either way, a whole bunch of stuff happens all at once because we have a response. When jealousy comes up, it might be anger toned, it might be sadness toned. Very frequently, people report to me that they feel shame about their jealousy. They feel like they shouldn't feel jealousy, or they feel shame because, if there's jealousy going on, something must be wrong in my relationship, and I don't want other people to know about that.
Right.
As soon as we've got shame in the picture, now we have decreased conversations happening amongst people because people tend to hide rather than show up when shame is present. So we have a really complicated puzzle to solve because we want people to be able to talk about their jealousy. But often when we start talking about it, it's very clumsy. And we just feel like, oh my gosh, I just need my partner to stop whatever they're doing that's inspiring this because I want to feel differently.
Can it come out of nowhere, though? You know, that song, talking about music, that song by the Fine Young Cannibals, Suspicious Minds.
Yeah.
I think what Rankin Roger, if I remember correctly, this is going back, what he was trying to say in that song was that there was no reason for the suspicion. It was just a suspicious mind. It was, in a way, imaginary, as you talked about earlier.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the different kinds of jealousy. So there's rational jealousy. Rational jealousy is when I know my partner is over there. I see them interacting with someone. I see all the signs of romance I see what's happening. Now, they may deny that there's any sort of feeling or any inclination, but I see it and I can point to where my suspicions are coming from. But there is such a thing as simply delusional jealousy. I am inventing it from nowhere. To me, so I studied Jungian and archetypal psychology, which means I really care a lot about the stories that come out of your childhood, that come out of your whole life, right? You exist as a person who's had an entire life. If your experience as a child was that you were abandoned, you were not receiving differential treatment from your parents, your caregivers, if you felt uncared for, I could imagine, it's really easy to imagine, forming a sort of core wound that makes jealousy really easy to imagine, right? So suspicion might be a really common experience for that person. Whereas another person who had a different historical background may feel like, no, unless I see a threat actually playing out, and when I go to my partner, they're evasive and they give me all these dodgy answers. No, I'm fine, because their baseline level of feeling secure in their relationship is different. The suspicious mind is a real thing for a vast majority of us. Most of us have a sense of ick that can just come out of nowhere. Not everybody, though.
I imagine there's some overlap between those two things, the delusional versus the more straightforward, if you will, jealousy. Something happens, but then people take it too far. I remember once years ago, my wife and I had this conversation. It was exactly the scenario you just painted. We were at some sort of party. We were off talking to our own groups of folks, and I saw her, and she was doing this funny twirling of the hair thing as
Yeah.
she was talking to this guy, and I remember thinking that's something she does as a little flirtatious sort of move. And I asked her about it afterwards. I asked her about it and I said, hey, and she said she was really nervous. That's why she was doing that. So I interpreted it as sort of a flirtatious thing. She's like, no, that was, and I believed her. I think she was just nervous about it, but it was a rational thing sort of crossing over into delusional.
Right. And what if it was also, what if it was a little flirtatious? This calls into question and a really important piece of the puzzle. What counts as flirting?
Yes.
And what's okay for each of us? Because there is actually no standard definition. We don't know. And what if someone's experiencing just a little bit of juice, right? There's just a little something, a little zing, and it is genuinely harmless. And they're simply like, oh yeah, you know what? I felt that feeling you get when you're talking with someone new. This is a person I'm never even going to see again. But like, yeah, you know what? Maybe that was an unconscious flirtatious behavior. The important thing is you were able to go to your wife and say, hey, you know what? This brought up some stuff for me. Talk about it. Even if her answer had been, yeah, you know what? I think I fell into a little bit of flirtatious behavior. I'm sorry. Did that hurt you? Now we could do repair. Now we can do immediate wound care, like right away. And then we could talk about, okay, what are our expectations? Is that something that should be outside of the boundaries of our relating? There's so much gray zone. Most of us don't actually know exactly what constitutes a jealousy-inducing behavior in our partner until we see it. True relational safety is built through having explicit conversations about what we both want, what we need, how we actually want to create the boundaries of this relationship, how we want to protect it, and really importantly, what are we going to do if either of us finds ourselves outside of the bounds? What are we going to do next? Because if we don't have a repair plan, then jealousy could lead us down a path straight to demise. Like it could crush the entire relationship. If we have repair plans in place, then we could potentially come back from a jealousy-inducing situation.
I think that this is probably one of the really important points here is that, first of all, no one is immune to this, maybe not even at any age, any culture. No demographic is immune. And given that, you should have a repair plan or first aid plan, whatever you want to call it, in your back pocket. That requires conversation at a time, probably when you're not in the throes of jealousy. I know you're more on the educational side of thing as opposed to the clinician side of things nowadays, but are there techniques that you have instructed, your patients to deal with jealousy?
Yeah. So I love working with jealousy in a very proactive way. So the first thing I ask people to do, and I work with people on this from the perspective that no one wants jealousy to destroy their lives, right? It sounds very simple, but if we just remember that jealousy, we want to unpack it, we want to get to know it, we want to befriend it. I ask people first to treat it as something that is entirely happening within them. So it actually requires just at least a moment of realizing that no matter what your partner's behavior is, the feeling that's coming up in you is yours. So I ask people to get to know the sensations of their jealousy first. Literally the sensations in your body. What's the weight, the heat, what's the texture of this jealousy? A lot of people will describe to me knots in their tummy, constriction in their chest, their throat feels tight, they'll get tingles at the back of their head, or they'll feel like their extremities go numb. I ask them to do this because in my research studies with people who were dealing really well with jealousy, they reported that they could identify jealousy early. They knew that it was happening. So they were able to do some things much earlier. So if you identify your sensations, okay, that's my jealousy sensation. We can all do that right now. We can just remember a time when we were jealous. What did it feel like in your body? If you know that, you've got at least a basic stance for, okay, I can take responsibility for this feeling, for tending myself, for tending my nervous system, for helping myself to come back into enough regulation that I can move through the rest of the steps.
would you sort of advocate those same steps for envy then? I mean, let's say, I'm getting I want to make sure I get the terms right, but jealousy in a friendship, you're not necessarily, there's not a triangle.
Well, maybe.
But there's
so that's actually important. So jealousy and friendship, there could be a triangle, right? If there is a lot of us have many friends, right? And so if there is someone who you think is going to be your rival for this friendship, let's say your best friend all of a sudden now is hanging out with this other person, you could absolutely have jealousy going on. But it could also be that you're experiencing envy. And jealousy and envy often show up at the same time, because if your rival shows up and they are funnier than you, or they have more access to fun events to take someone to, whatever it is, well, you may be envious of them. If it's a romantic rival, do you judge your rival as prettier than you, funnier than you, more attractive, having more money? That comparison, that draws the dyad between you and the rival. So now you have envy. And if there's fear, if there's that threat that the interruption will happen, now we have jealousy. So yeah, I would still turn to the sensations to begin working with either of them, but I would also then move through the steps. I would name the jealousy, I would get to know it, what flavor is it? And then I move to step 3, which is, I got to get into the stories. What is the story I am telling myself about this jealousy? Does it feel like it's going to break my whole world? Does it feel like am I pinning all the responsibility on the other? I need to dig into those stories, and we can go as far back as we want. We can dig into our childhoods and look at, where do I feel like if I am abandoned, I will not be resilient. I won't be okay, right? Because the less okay I feel, the more threatening this is likely to be. I would treat the envy and jealousy the same in that moment. And I would also tease them apart, because the envy itself could be an indicator that I have something I'm motivated to do. I want to move toward that way of being. But it could also be an indicator that I feel that I have some self-esteem problems in that area. Perhaps I have body image issues. Perhaps I don't feel confident about whatever aspect it is that they're bringing. Building our confidence isn't just about, moving towards something. It's also about addressing deep-seated issues.
Again, in your TED Talk, you taught me this word that is a real word. I just hadn't heard it before. And it's funny, when you first said it, the word is compersion. And when I first said it, I thought you said compassion. Then I Googled it and looked it up, and I thought that was very evolved. I don't know if it's part of a rescue plan or part of a first aid kit, whatever, but the idea of reframing things into compersion versus jealousy. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So compersion is a term that can help us remember that jealousy isn't the only thing we can feel in response to our partner having an exciting moment or getting attention, right? Jealousy can come up and inspire a whole bunch of threat responses. But we can also experience compersion, which is joy for our partner's joy for the other's joy, even if it has nothing to do with us. When you say it's an evolved emotion, I think it is a mature emotion. I don't know whether it was evolutionarily advantageous. I don't think there's any data on that yet, but it's definitely a sign of maturity to be able to stand in my space. So let's just say that I am at a party and I'm watching my partner. I happen to know that my partner loves to tell stories about physics. He just loves it. It's one of his favorite things to do. So if I see him across the room and he is talking to someone, he's lit up and he's just feeling all the things, and I see a woman reach out and just touch his forearm during that conversation, I have an option right there. One part of me may be feeling like, whew, that's a little something. I might feel a zing. I might feel jealousy. And at the exact same time, I might feel like, wow, I know he feels seen in this moment. I know he's experiencing profound joy because his very long-winded stories about physics are being well received. And I can feel joy for that as well. And the key to compersion is we don't actually have to get rid of jealousy to feel compersion. They're antonyms, but they're not mutually exclusive.
So it's not the opposite of jealousy.
I mean, it is, but we can hold two opposite truths at the same time. But this is why I say it's a mature emotion, because to be able to hold two seemingly oppositional things, right? That requires, in Jungian psychology, we would say you're bearing the tension of opposites.
Do you have to practice to become good at compersion?
Some people seem to be naturally inclined that way. And some people actually also, we didn't talk about this, not sure if you want to, but some people find jealousy arousing, right? So they may feel erotic compersion because they actually like the feeling of, ooh, there's my partner's, oh, they're having attention. So there are a lot of ways that compersion could show up for someone in a very, I hesitate to say natural, but jealousy could spontaneously occur at any moment for any person. And in fact, most of us have experienced compersion in non-romantic situations. We watch our best friend having a beautiful, joyful experience with their partner, and we feel super excited for them. We watch a little kid having ice cream or getting a balloon, and we're very excited for them, even though it's not our balloon, not our ice cream. But then we turn and we're in our romantic relationship, and it can be really challenging to feel compersion, even though we have access to it in other areas. It can be challenging in this area. So in that respect, yeah, I need to bring awareness that it's even possible. So one of the reasons I love having this word is it makes us aware that there is a possibility that we could move toward that. And yeah, it does take practice. In my experience, it takes practice. I've been researching jealousy for a very long time now. I still feel jealousy. Like people often ask, like, oh, so did you just get rid of it? No, I did not. I am a very jealous person. And I also feel a lot of compersion. I feel both of them. I let them both exist at the same time. And that's something we can do with our kids too. We can invite our children we can help them understand, like, you're feeling jealousy. Is there also, do they even know? Most of them will not know this word compersion. And so we can help them at least have an understanding that there is this possibility, but not shame them if they don't feel it spontaneously.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We're not trying to shame anybody, but I do think this idea of this word compersion for anybody who's listening right now, to lean into this word a little bit. I don't want to proselytize this, but I just think it's a really interesting word. You taught me something, and I think it's something even if I can't practice it necessarily, I strive toward it. I think it's really good to have joy in other people's joys.
Right.
As a general rule.
And what if you practiced it, like truly practice it by simply bringing attention, right? Like if I bring my attention to when my partner's feeling joy, some of us struggle with compersion because we need to feel included, like it needs to feel a little bit about us. So allowing our partner to experience joy that really truly excludes us, it does take practice, but I believe we can do it if we start with easier areas. Like I think that starting off with romantic compersion is probably a big ask for most people, but you can certainly do it about their professional successes, about their friendships. It's much easier. And when you know that you can bring this into your life and you can name it, there's another way we can raise our self-esteem. Like, hey, I am capable of this. I can hold this big, mature experience. That in itself can help us feel more stable and resilient.
This is fascinating. So Valentine's Day coming up. First of all, is that a thing for you? Do you care about Valentine's Day?
I do enjoy Valentine's Day. My husband's birthday happens to be the next day, so it's quite the twofer around this house.
Good for him, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's very lucky.
Do you see any of these things that we're talking about, jealousy, for example, around Valentine's Day plans or people's relationships with others? A
couple things can come up. For one thing, sometimes there is just straight up jealousy, and this can happen amongst like our friends. We can feel like, if our friend is celebrating Friendsgiving with someone else, we would feel jealousy. We might feel jealousy that they weren't celebrating with us. With the emphasis on our special day being Valentine's Day, and I'm supposed to have this experience, I don't think there's so much jealousy in monogamous relationships that comes up here, but a lot of envy, a lot of envy. And that may surface up feelings of jealousy. Sometimes we create space for jealousy to brew because we're feeling envy or because we're feeling other difficult emotions. And there's also this thing called justice jealousy. Justice jealousy shows up when I really just believe that my partner is not going to show up this way. And then all of a sudden I see them showing up for someone else in this really great way. And Valentine's Day is often something that couples write off. After a while, they're like, fine, I give up. He's just not gonna, he's not gonna get it. He's not gonna do anything. And then if out of nowhere you see your valued other somehow with a little bit of juice around this, it can bring up this feeling of like, ugh, I don't like that. I thought you couldn't do it. What's happening here? It's in non-monogamous relationships, just as jealousy gets much messier. In monogamous relationships, though, I find that it's hard to accept that after a long time, our partner can actually change. It can be hard for us to realize like, oh, actually, maybe they're just doing their work. Maybe they actually dug in. So instead, it can raise up these feelings of suspicion and like, oh, they're showing up for this now. Should I be suspicious? And this gets us back to the conversation of, are we talking to our partners? Do we know what's going on with them? Are we actually having explicit conversations about what the expectations are and what work they're doing on themselves? Because sometimes they're just doing their work and they're actually getting better. And I want to celebrate that.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, what's in your heart and what manifests, there may be a gap between the two.
For sure. Absolutely. Especially if we were not provided great models of romantic and long-term partnership, which, face it, most of us weren't. Or even if the model that was presented to us was good for our parents, that doesn't mean it's a great model for us. And so we may struggle to actually inhabit our loving relationships the way we want to.
Yeah, my parents never celebrated Valentine's Day, but I was expected to, you know.
And did you step up? Was that your move?
Yes, I've stepped up, but you've definitely given me some things to think about. Jolie, 2025 may be different as a result.
It's so interesting to me to think about jealousy around Valentine's Day because I think envy probably comes up even more because this is also a day when we see a lot of people get engaged, a lot of people getting big, glorious, outings and dates. And so this can bring up a huge sensation of envy, exclusion, feeling left out. So one of the pieces of medicine for that is to remind ourselves that, in fact, it is a made-up day.
Yes.
And it may not mean anything to you. So before you get down the envy train, have you actually gotten into, does it matter? Do I even care about this? Because I got to say, in my house, Valentine's Day is a thing, but really most of the energy goes toward my husband and I'm perfectly happy. I love it that way. It's his weekend. It's usually we're celebrating all of those things together. And so whatever his response is to me, I'm like, oh, that's yummy. But we have Princess Day for me. That's another day altogether near my birthday.
I like that. Yeah, I think also the idea of Valentine's Day for me, and I'm a pretty romantic guy, but I think the idea of it being such a consumer sort of driven day, I feel like I'm being manipulated a little bit into spending way too much money on going out to dinner on this day versus, the 15th or the 16th or the 12th, whatever it might be.
And does it even matter to you? Does it give you a payoff? If I have worked with quite a few people who feel like the question around Valentine's Day is, I'm supposed to, because I need to be able to present it to other people. If this is an Instagram holiday for you, then there's also the question, could you revisit that? Does it actually matter for you? And what do you want to do about that?
Just two more quick questions. I know I'm taking more of your time, but again, we have kids around the same age. You've talked about the fact that your kids may go running in the other direction when you want to talk about jealousy with them. But going back to compersion, can we cultivate compersion within our children?
I believe we can. And this is part of what I really think that the parents right now who have little kids, I think are in a prime spot to do some really important work. For one thing, they can help their kids understand what jealousy and envy are, right? They can help them identify it because we know jealousy and envy are going to show up when they have little kids. So you can just start naming that emotion. And then right next to it, you can name compersion. Can you help the child know that this is a real feeling, that being happy for another is wonderful? However, there's a big caveat here, and that is I would never want to convince my child to feel false happiness, right? There's a thing we can do, especially, I see this actually even with my teens, this sense that I should align with the good emotion, the nice emotion, and that can create a sense of I can't show my true complexity. I can't show that actually I'm also really jealous, I'm feeling really icky because I'm supposed to feel this better emotion. And that encourages a level of compliance, dishonest harmony that I wouldn't want to invoke in my kids. So I would really want to drive home the idea that your jealousy is just as welcome as compersion. And we need to not act negatively on our jealousy. And when our compersion's present, name it. one of the biggest things we can do is actually share that we're feeling that way and make a space to actually say, like, yeah, I'm so excited for you. I feel really happy that you're having that. And practice it. If we model that for kids, it does change how things go.
This idea of naming the emotions as you're experiencing them, that's a really good tip. And maybe that's very basic for you, but no one's ever said that to me before. And I think it's because you have these things and they're uniquely your own. I mean, everyone has their own unique, things, and the idea that you know it and you can name it, so it gives it some substance, it makes it more objective in a way, and something that you can maybe more count on.
Yeah. Well, when I was doing my first research study on jealousy, I noticed that the people who were successfully dealing with it, they were noticing the sensations and then they were naming it. They were just out and out saying, like, oh, this is jealousy. I'm jealous right now. I'm feeling jealousy. They're saying it out loud. They're saying it to their partner. They're saying it to their community. They're naming it. And in doing so, immediately the wind is out of the jealousy sails. Like, okay, it's being acknowledged. If we think about that green-eyed monster, What does a monster want? It wants attention, right? It wants attention. So I think of jealousy a little bit like Toothless in How to Train Your Dragon. Like if you can just be patient and get to know it, it's actually not necessarily going to be a fire-breathing dragon. It could instead be a really, really funny and playful emotion that you experience within yourself. And if you are experiencing rational jealousy based on real harms, things that are happening in your relationship, then great, you named it. And now you can start to understand, actually, this relationship does not feel good for me. And we either need to get to therapy together, we need to learn how to work with our emotions, and we need to have some much clearer understandings of where our agreements and boundaries actually are. Because I'm not having my needs met right now.
You have. We've talked a lot about music today, but you've curated a jealousy playlist called "Dancing with the Green-Eyed Shadow." I love this. What are some of the themes?
So I use this playlist myself. It's just one of my personal tools, and I have always taught my clients to do this. When jealousy shows up, we need a rescue plan. And for me, the idea that I'm just going to escape the jealousy isn't realistic. I know I have to pass through it. So my jealousy playlist lasts for a while. It's over an hour long. It takes me through an experience of calming music. And then I get into, there's a song, I Can't Make You Love Me. It's a great reminder to me. It brings up emotions. It helps me cry out the feeling, right? Like I may not be feeling loved in the way I want to be loved. I curated this particular playlist and I adapt it and adjust it over time as my experience is changing. But I love it because it reminds me to be in my jealousy for a period of time and feel it all the way to the bottom. Actually feel the feeling. And then after I have done that, now I am in a much different space to go to my partner and actually say, okay, so this is the emotional response that's coming up for me. Here's where it came from. Will you work with me here? Can we actually bring this into a place where we're both feeling good again? Because right now I'm not. But I take responsibility, and music is such a great way to support ourselves in having a different experience, not by running away from it, but by deepening into it.
What a pleasure, Jilly. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
I enjoyed that.
I really, really appreciate it. This was lovely.